Elder Kissi received his medical training and joined the Church of Jesus Christ in England. Then he returned to Ghana and established a hospital, which he named Deseret Hospital. He was instrumental in helping establish the church in Ghana. Between 1980 and 2001, Elder Kissi served as the first president of the Accra branch, as district president, as acting president of the Ghana Accra Mission, as a regional representative, and as a counselor in the Ghana Mission Presidency. Elder Emmanuel Abu Kissi now serves as an Area Authority 70 for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Elder Kissi is in town for General Conference, so we at BYU Studies asked if we could steal him away for a few moments and from his responsibilities here in town to speak with us. And he was so gracious and kind to come and speak with us. So let's show our love and give a welcome to Elder Kissi.
Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. This place is becoming familiar with me, and the topic is interesting. There's a lot of historical background, so I'd like you to pay attention so that when we come to the conclusion, we would understand how it all happened. Now, this is to talk mainly about why in Ghana Christians and Muslims get along fine, whilst in other places, in West Africa and other places in the world, Muslims and Christians are at one another's throat. Of course, talking about differences in the faith, we realize that sometimes Christians and Christians do not agree together. And the history that we have got written is an evidence to that we as Latter-day Saints were very bitterly, chased around by, sort of a joint effort by the other Christian churches. And that is the very unfortunate thing that happened. But right now, I'm not going to talk about Christian against Christian, because that doesn't go too far many times. But I'm going to talk about why is it that in Ghana alone, or maybe in other places there aren't many, Christians and Muslims can operate together as friends and neighbors. Now, in many nations where there are state religions, maybe Islam, maybe Baal worship, it may be anything else. We remember in the days of Daniel, Meshach, and Abednego, and Shadrach. According to the book of Daniel, first 6 chapters, if you didn't accept to worship Baal, you were punishable by death. And that's why Daniel was in the lion's den, and these others were in the very hot oven. In many nations, Christianity exists with Islam, but it is known that these two are not particularly compatible. And many times, for no good reason at all, misunderstandings easily result in disproportionate violence. And it's rather unfortunate. Until very recently, in the northern Ghana, where we have a lot more Muslims than Christians, there's a lot of violence. And it's not because of religious differences, but it was really ethnic or cultural differences. We may have groups of different ethnic groups, and we may also have people within the same ethnic groups. There are times when two people were fighting over guinea fowl, and they happened to belong to two different ethnic groups. And when the fight was bitter, this man's group came, and it was a big war. The government had to spend a lot to stop it. And a chief died, and they're in the same family. Now, each group is entitled to ascend the throne. But the sort of struggle, there's always political campaign about that. And when the chief died, so many bad things were ascribed to that. And for about 2 years or more than 4 years, they still fight. The chief has not been buried. He was actually decapitated. And he's still not buried. And a lot of things are going on. Two people from the same parentage with different interests. And so it's not only because of religion that people fight. Now, we know that these things go on usually between these two religious groups. And in Ghana, there's harmonious coexistence. Now, recently, this year, January, the Muslims and Christians organized a peace march because there was going to be a soccer match between two very rival champions. And almost every year, there's violence. Now, this violence is not because of tribal groups. One is based in Accra, the capital. The other one is based in Kumasi, the capital of Ashanti. And there's always fight. But the interesting thing is that each team has a mixture of the various tribal groups. So it's not tribal. And their supporters also come from the same spread. So it's not tribal. It's just the nature of the football game, the soccer, that people just misunderstand. So this time, the Muslims and the Christians came together to have a peace march in Tamale, a very strong hold for Muslims. And it was very interesting. For once, there was no violence in that march. Actually, the march was postponed, should have come on a week before the general elections. Now, the current president, Kufuor, comes from Kumasi, and he has been involved in the Ashanti Kotoko football team. And ex-President Rollins is in Accra. He supports the other team. And they thought that the political barometer wasn't very stable. And so they had to postpone the match until after the general elections. So you can imagine the tension that the football match could have brought. But interestingly, I'm aware of a group that call themselves the Citadel. And it's a group of Christian and Muslims who have come together to form a church. They use both the Quran and the Bible. I cannot imagine how it works, but it does. They are saying that they are for peace, and they think they can team up together. I hope there are other such moves in other places of the world, but this is what happens. Now, why is Ghana then different from other nations? And I'll give you a little bit of historical background. Now, we all would remember the Crusaders. When Constantine became emperor of the Roman Empire, he changed state religion from Baal worship to Christianity. In Baal worship, you must either worship the state god or you disappear, or you may be killed. Now, when he changed from Baal worship to Christianity, either deliberately or oversight, he did not withdraw the practice of hunting and getting rid of those who do not accept the state religion. And so the Crusaders were formed, and this is history. And they went out and did a lot of devastation. And if you did not belong to the Christian faith, then maybe it was not good for you to live. The Muslims remember this. Probably some of them are saying, quoting from the Book of Mormon, the Christians are practicing the foolish traditions of their forebears. If it was in those days, this is what they probably would have said. And I think it's a good thing to go ahead. So the Muslims put sanctions on their people. One day, a very young 16, 17-year-old schoolgirl came to the clinic. She had been shaven with broken bottle. The military regimes introduced into Ghana. She was shaven with a broken bottle, and she had, you can imagine, she was bleeding. And she came to the clinic, and her story was she was a student in one of the regular schools, and apparently she was being close to some young man, and that young man is Christian. And the father did not want that, and the brothers did not want that. So one day the father instructed the boys, they shut her up in the room, they broke a bottle and shaved her hair. And so she came to me, and I asked what she would want to do. She said, what can I do? If I want to go against my parents, I have to leave home. But where do I go? So she was saddled with that. But you see, these people could also go further and apply the Holy War doctrine. And they would now seek to eliminate non-Islam people. And we understand they want to be the equivalent of martyrs. And they think that a great reward awaits them, anybody who would do that. And I understand that the suicide bombers have got a key as part of the contraption of the bomb. And it is said that that key is a key you use to open the mansion ready for you when you die in that process. And so this is the reason why some of them do what they do. Now, by the early years of the 8th century, Arabs had conquered the whole of the coastal strip of North Africa, and they installed Arab ruling families who spread Islam. Islam and Arabic culture first came to West Africa along the desert routes from North Africa. Islam established its first roots in Sudanic cities in West Africa, from peaceful persuasion through Muslim merchant clerics. In the 9th century, there were indigenous Muslims in ancient Ghana and other states. By 1067, there was a flourishing Muslim community in the city Kumbi, which was the city of ancient Ghana. And on their conquest of Kumbi in 1076, they gave the inhabitants the choice of Islam or death. Evidently, a state religion had been established, and you either tolerate it, you either live with it, or you have to disappear, either by your own volition to leave the place, or you might be killed. And many fled. On the other hand, Christians, I want to say that Islam is no good religion. They may even capitalize on the satanic verses, which seek to prove that Islam is evil. Now, some may look at Ephesians chapter 2, verse 12, and say, being without Christ, Muslims are aliens and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in this world. And what one might even go on and say that Islam and Muslims are the sons of perdition. The first contact of Europeans with West Africa was in the 15th century, 1400 plus. The Portuguese, a small state of farmers and fishermen, economically poor, not involved in the political conflicts that absorb the energies of the European states. She was also relatively free from the renewed aggression by Muslim states of the Mediterranean. Her hardy fishermen had long experience of sailing the Atlantic Ocean, and politically she was in contact with the Muslim North African states, which marketed to them wonderful merchandise from West Africa. Now, Portugal had nothing to lose but everything to gain by seeking adventure with West Africa. Now, in 1415, Prince Henry, they called him Prince Henry the Navigator. He did a lot of work in navigation. He was a fourth son of the king at that time. The king was called John I. He captured Ceuta of Morocco and became the Portuguese governor there. He sought power and wealth for his country. He conceived a plan of seeking a seaway to the gold supplies of Western Sudan. And his desire for imperial status for Portugal was to be accompanied by an advance in Christianity. He had learned that the Sudanic people were neither Christian nor Muslim, and that they had no military alliances with the North African states. Now, Henry's mission was to convert the heathen people of the gold-bearing areas to Roman Catholicism by persuasion or force, even by enslavement if necessary. And he said, thus would souls be brought to God, thus would the heathen escape damnation. And Henry had also wished for an alliance with an immensely powerful Christian kingdom of one Prester John in Africa. But I understand this was just European legend. They used to say so, but there wasn't any such thing. Now, this alliance he hoped would destroy Islam in the north of Africa. To his disappointment, however, some of the navigators brought slaves to sell in Lisbon. And in 1443, one Tristram returned from West Africa with 29 Africans for sale. Henry was very disappointed, but the people convinced him that the only way to convert these heathen peoples individually was to enslave them. So he sort of gave up and let them have their way. Henry died 1460, and other explorers continued. And by 1471, they had discovered the valuable gold supply of Elmina in the Gold Coast of present-day Ghana. Interest shifted from exploration to exploitation in the Gulf of Guinea. On the Gold Coast, they established their most important base in West Africa, and a powerful fort was built in 1582, and initially they had to guard about 100,000 pounds sterling of gold yearly. And this is how it worked. Now, the Portuguese, when they got there, every coast that they went through, they had certain supply. They had ivory from La Côte d'Ivoire, so they called it the Ivory Coast. They had a lot of gold from Ghana, Gold Coast, they called it. They had pepper and things from other places, spices. But when they had a route around the Cape of Good Hope to India and those places, the Asian spices then had an easy route back to Europe. And so the pepper markets of West Africa failed. Now, it's been observed that moral upbringing through religious indoctrination was basically the same for Christianity and Islam. You either join us or you die. And this made potential destroyers of Christians and Muslims destroy anyone who is not with us. Sociologists tell us that morals are not a question of law or what is legal, but it is what people have been brought up to know and accept as good or bad. And in any case, the argument is that the law does not necessarily uphold the truth. There may be some technicalities, and because of this and that, then judgment goes the wrong way. But according to law, it's correct. Now, who sets the tone for morality? We know, at least from my experience, that any man in Utah marrying more than one woman is immoral. This has even gone into the law, so the law does not allow that. If you are in Ghana and you are found to carry a gun on your body in town, you'll be questioned by the police. You have no business carrying a gun. It is immoral. It's dangerous. Nobody would allow that. Now, so what moral training have Ghanaians got that makes them different? That make us say, well, let him live his own way. If it's good for him, that's okay. Now, there is a table that I would have loved to put on the board, but it's not possible now. But I'll give you some information from this table. The Cambridge Fact Finder of 1997 made this research. And I'm going to quote some interesting figures, not all of them. It's Benin, Gambia, Ghana, Guinea, Liberia, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Senegal, and Togo. Now, we find that in Benin, we have 15% Christian and 13% Muslim. The remaining 70% are African traditional religion. And anything goes in that umbrella. In Gambia, with a population of 1 million plus, Christianity is 14%, Muslim is 85%, and African traditional religion 1%. In Ghana, with 17 million people, 50% are Christian, 12% are Muslim, and the others are African traditional religion, and they also have Hinduism, they have Baha'i faith, Buddhism, Hare Krishna, and many others, including the African traditional religion. Guinea has 6 million people. No Christian is recorded there. 75% Muslim, 24% African traditional religion. That leaves us with 1%, which they did not account for. Liberia has 3 million at that time, 1% Christian, 20% Muslim, 70% African traditional religion. Nigeria, 96 million people, 34% Christian, 50% Muslim, 10% African traditional religion. Senegal, 17 million, 5% Christian, 91% Muslim. In Sierra Leone, 4 million, almost 5 million, 8% Christian, 60% Muslim, 30% African tradition. And Togo, 4 million, 35% Christian, 10% Muslim, 50% African traditional religion. And African traditional religion is a very weird kind of idea. Now, on secret societies, Stride and Itheka, in the book Peoples and Empires of West Africa, give an illustration from Sierra Leone and Liberia. This is just to give you some insight into what African traditional religion could be. Now, the same societies have women's part and men's part. And in Sierra Leone and Liberia, they have different names, the same religion. Now, Sierra Leone has Poro for men and Sunday for women. And Liberia has Beri, B-E-R-I, for men and Bundu for the women. The same religion, the same practices. Now, the same societies, therefore, have different names in the different countries. The translation of Poro is said to mean the laws of the ancestors, the laws of the ancestors. The ancestors used their supernatural ability to back the Poro's power The Poro is call it the fetish priest. And he possessed secret medicines. Now, when in traditional medicine, traditional religion, they say medicine in this regard, it means that they are able to affect you personally by spiritual means. Of course, you know that you can have physical performances that will have spiritual effect. The Poro could communicate with the dreaded Poro spirit through its shrines. The Poro had religious secrets known only to its members and initiates, and the people could be punished by the medicine and anger of the Poro. Now, some people give a personal experience of this. Now, in 1506 to 10, one Valentin Fernandez, basically a Portuguese, I think, who wrote in Sierra Leone and said, in Sierra Leone, there are certain houses or churches, he called them churches, maybe that was appropriate for that, of churches of idols where women do not enter. And then the same century, 16th century, there was a writer who called himself Dalmada, I think he's also Portuguese, testified that an evil spirit, there was an evil spirit, and before it appears, it is shouted throughout the village because the evil spirit is coming to visit them. And according to the story, when the spirit is coming, and they have announced it, they have very strong nobles who walk naked in town. Anybody they will meet, they will kill. And that was as bad as it was. The spirit is said to be very powerful. And a man who is a priest, maybe the high priest, when he is going to invoke this spirit to come, he would wear a very terrible mask. I believe the sight of the mask alone would be enough to kill people before anybody gets them. In his contribution to the widest West African Association of Theological Institutions, which was held in 2000 in the city of Ogbomoso in Nigeria, in one institution, a writer, one of the contributors to the conference said, he was called Protus. He said, yet in Nigeria, precisely after the end of the Civil War, that is 1967 to 1970, people seem not to be the least concerned about the role of higher education and by extension, the moral character of the youth, the devilish activities of secret societies, and also called confraternities in Nigeria universities, cannot be overemphasized. Instigating violent clashes and unleashing terror on campus, generating tension and violent demonstrations on campus, attempting to act as alternate authority in institutions by bending rules, regulations, and systems to suit their whims and caprices, generally terrorizing the other members of the university community, students and staff alike, by issuing threats to their perceived enemies, intimidating students' union government officials, or attempting to hijack the student union government, creating an atmosphere of lawlessness and insecurity, and this is all happening at the campus. In Nigeria universities, the campus cult scourge has degenerated to include the young activities of ladies who seek to assert their will and dominance on fellow students. And there are several examples that were given. The women, the university ladies have the Jezebels. I mean, if you have an association which calls itself Jezebels, then you can have an idea perhaps what it's all about. Now, all these things are, to a lesser extent, present in Ghana also. You'd be surprised, maybe not. So what are the factors that make Ghana different? All Ghanaians have migrated from many other places. The Akans, the dominant ethnic groupings, came from the kingdom of Ghana, the ancient kingdom of Ghana, which is Western Sudan. Now, those days, Sudan spanned from Senegal, the westmost coast of West Africa, to the east coast of present-day Sudan. So when we say Sudan, it doesn't mean that place, but it's the Western Sudan, which was between the Senegal River and the Nile, the Niger River. Now, there was a southward movement from this area between that Senegal and Niger to the Guinea forests in West Africa. And they came in little bands, and that occurred about 1,000 years ago, and it took a few years for that to happen. They came to Ghana, settled in some place for a while, and then they went to the area of two big rivers, the Pra and Dauphin rivers. And then from there, they spread throughout the country, north, east, west. And they went, that time, the white man hasn't put a ruler to demarcate which is Sierra Leone and which is Ghana and which is Côte d'Ivoire. And so they just moved around, and everybody could go wherever they wanted to go. We have an Ewe community that also came from Yoruba in the town of Ketu in Nigeria. We have a Dangbe also, which came from southern Nigeria. The Gans themselves say they came from the north, the Sokoto area, and the Portuguese think that is more likely to be true, though other historians say that they came from southern Nigeria. The Gonja from Sierra Leone and Liberia, Mamprusi, Dagomba, and the Nanumba from the Chad region or somewhere else in Central Africa. Now, Muslims seeking trade and establishing a religion entered West Africa from the north and introduced Islam. Europeans seeking trade and desiring to establish an empire and advancing Christianity entered West Africa from the south coast. The northern and the southern, the northern reaches of West African countries therefore had a greater Islamic influence, and the south has greater Christian influence. Now, each religion condemned the other. Maybe the Christian will say a good Muslim is a dead one, and the Muslims will say the same against the Christians. Now, in the recent past history of Ghana, there were three major empires, the Akwamu, the Denchra, and finally the Asante. All of them were Akan. They are still Akan. Now, for about 150 years, the Asante Empire was the most important factor in the political, commercial history of modern Ghana, Togo, and La Côte d'Ivoire. And I think only the British were able to quieten the Asante after a long struggle. At their height in 1824, the Asante influenced between 125,000 to 150,000 square miles of land with perhaps 3 to 5 million people. So they had a large empire. Kumasi was established in 1660 by Obriabua, who was the first known king of Asante, followed by Osetutu, who was a very great king, and another Opoku-Ware, who was also very great. And at the end, Opoku-Ware died 1750. Now, all these ethnic groups in Ghana, Togo, Ivory Coast were under Asante rule and code of ethics. Now, the Asante people, they wanted freedom. And they had come from ancient Ghana, and they have traveled all this way down here, and they had their way of doing things. And they didn't want a lot of force. They rather wanted to lord it over other people. But within themselves, it was basically live and let's live. And everybody should do the right thing. And the king saw to it that his subjects, kings, chiefs, would also see that their people are free and able to do what they wanted to do. Now, after Opoku-Ware's death, a series of chiefs and kings came. One particular king was called Kwame, or Sir Kwame, and he ruled from 1777 to 1801. Now, what was observed of him was that he had an inclination towards Islam. and he instituted Quranic laws as civil code of Ashanti. The other kings didn't like it. They realized that if they allowed him, he would be a tyrant and be an autocratic ruler like the emperors in the savannah, which is north, which is closer to greater Islam influence. And so the Queen Mother, and those of us who do not know, in Ghanaian societies, in many Ghanaian cultures, there's a Queen Mother who is a mother of all the people in the state. And the Queen Mother is the one who installs a chief. If the Queen Mother doesn't want that person to be a chief, there's no way. And so the kingmakers go together and they take a decision and they present 3 names to the Queen Mother. She selects one. And the Queen Mother decided that he doesn't want Islamic law in her land. And because she doesn't like it, the other chiefs who matter sided with her, and that chief was distilled. The Queen Mother says, "You are no more the king, I distill you." That's all. You can't do anything else. She says, "This is mine. I won't let you sit on the stool again." That's the end. Today, there's a Jerry Bedu Ado who is introducing Ghana, Traveler's Guide, the Ghanaian people, their history, and their culture. And this is what he says. Ghana's hospitality is legendary. Visitors are received with both warmth and sincerity, regardless of their race, religion, nationality, sex, or the color of their skin. The country's fabulous wealth that lured Europeans to her shores centuries ago is still in abundance. The right to self-determination, rather than a passive acceptance of the status quo, is displayed in every life in Ghana. This policy leads Ghanaians to taking the risks and responsibilities of error as well as success. Now, as most of you know, I'm not a sociologist, and I do not intend to pretend that I can propound sociological theories. I have only examined some of the available evidence as to what makes Ghanaians identical with or different from other peoples, even their immediate neighbors, with whom they have similar historical experiences and common ethnicity. The international press, a little while ago, came out with something very interesting. They say President John Agyekum Kufuor of Ghana is not newsy. He does not make news. He settles problems before the press get there. It's because he's got people who easily accept negotiation and understanding and are prepared to let go something so that there will be peace. And considering that the Ghanaians and the Nigerians and the Cote d'Ivoire, Ivorians, and the Togolese people have a lot of interaction, and some come from Nigeria where there's a lot of strife, and some come from other places where there's a lot of strife. One wonders, why is it that Ghana has a lot more peace and they understand one another and they are so warm-hearted and they receive people the way they do? I have a Nigerian medical officer, LDS, from Nigeria. He wants to live in Ghana and his wife. He said, "We don't want to live in Nigeria." And he would go to town and he's trying to make his papers so they can qualify to practice in Ghana. He comes back home in the evening and says, "Why is it that my people in Nigeria are not like the Ghanaians? Why are they so different?" He worries, he wonders. And he and his wife went to South Africa, to Johannesburg. They tried to stay there. They said, "No, there isn't peace there." And they came back, and the temple in Ghana was dedicated. They came to the temple once or twice. They decided they would love to live in Ghana. There was a Ghanaian Nigerian president, mission president, who said, "I wish I could stay permanently in Ghana." But there's a girl who came to live with us. The parents, the cousins were Nigerian, who brought her to Ghana to live for a little while. When they went back, the girl wanted to come back to Nigeria, to Ghana, to continue with education. And when he got back to Nigeria, his passport, he lost the passport. And she had only student ID card. And said, I'll go back to Ghana. He got to the border. She showed her identity card. And her name is a very similar, very common name for Ghanaians. And the security people, the immigration people out there, didn't have any doubt that he was Ghanaian. It's the same people. But why is it that in Ghana they behave differently? I have to leave you, good people, to add 1 and 1 and make, is it 2? I do not doubt, and I verily do not doubt that any one of you here is capable of this exercise to add 1 and 1 and get the correct answer. And on this topic of this Christians and Islam interactions, strife and misunderstanding and violence, as I said, I've gone through so many things. I haven't been able to pinpoint what is the reason. I have an idea. One would say, oh, because he belongs to that. But the majority of Ghanaians are Akan, and Akan spreads to La Côte d'Ivoire, and not to Togo, because Togo is bordering with the Airways who are in between. But the Akan people, to me, have made a great difference between the rest of West Africa, because they are a tolerating group of people, and they are less violent. These traditional African religions, which are very dangerous in many places, it's in Ghana too, in some places. But the Akan communities don't delve in this too much. Those at the shores have this for their sea gods, and it's not a violent thing. They worship the sea god, whatever it is, so that the sea will not swallow them, so that they come and walk in the sand again. So, brothers and sisters, I would like to end here and thank you for your audience and ask, may God bless you. Thank you.